to turn to the book of Matthew, chapter 12, looking at the miracles of Christ. Today we'll look at two separate miracles. But Matthew 12, verses 9 through 13. And when he, Jesus, was departed thence, he went into their synagogue. And behold, there was a man which had his hand withered. And they asked him, saying, that is, they asked Jesus, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath days? The reason they asked that question, that they might accuse him. And he said unto them, what man shall there be among you that shall have one sheep, and if it fall into a pit on the Sabbath day, will he not lay hold on it and lift it out? How much then is a man better than a sheep? Wherefore it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath days. Then saith he to the man with the withered hand, stretch forth thine hand. And he stretched it forth, and it was restored whole, like as the other. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all give account of this miracle. In their accounts, all three record the fact that Jesus entered the synagogue. Matthew writes here, Matthew 12:9, he went into their synagogue. Mark, chapter 3, verse 1, he entered again into the synagogue. So this isn't the first time he was in this synagogue. Luke 6, verse 6, Luke says, and it came to pass, also on another Sabbath, that he entered into the synagogue. So all three accounts begin with Jesus. That's where all three begin. All three accounts record that it was the Sabbath day when Jesus entered the synagogue. All three accounts speak of the Pharisees that were present. Luke, in chapter 6, verse 6, records the fact that Jesus taught that day in the synagogue. All three accounts call our attention to a particular man who was in the synagogue that day. Matthew writes here in Matthew 12, verse 10, behold, there was a man which had his hand withered. Mark chapter 3, verse 1, there was a man there in that synagogue which had his hand withered. Luke records, Luke 6, verse 6, there was a man, and he adds another detail. Again, Luke being a physician usually gives us a little more detail. There was a man there which had his right hand was withered. All three record the details of the miracle that took place. Matthew 12, verse 13, then saith he to the man, stretch forth thine hand. And he stretched it forth, and it was restored whole, like as the other. Notice in Mark chapter 3. Mark 3, verse 5. And when he had looked round about on them with anger, being grieved for the hardness of their hearts, he saith unto the man, stretch forth thine hand. And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored whole as the other. Notice in Luke chapter 6. Luke 6 and verse 10. And looking round about upon them all, he said unto the man, Stretch forth thy hand. And he did so, and his hand was restored whole as the other. So this was a very obvious and manifest event in the synagogue that day. Again, the healing miracles of Christ are pictures. They serve as pictures of rescue. Rescue from enslavement, rescued from wasted and broken lives. But it is something much more, much greater, more wonderful, more amazing than the actual healing miracle. All the healing miracles portray the spiritual needs of man. And they portray the salvation that is in Christ and the sufficiency of Christ to meet the needs of man. Every healing miracle declares those facts. So each of these miracles they portray Christ as the one who can fix a life. He is the life fixer. All the recorded miracles of Christ give us very valuable instruction. They provide to us guidance, encouragement. They most certainly promote faith and conviction and humility and thankfulness and praise. Jesus said to this man, Stretch it forth unto me. And that's our title this morning, Stretch it forth. So let's look at the scene. Jesus enters the synagogue. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, all after declaring Jesus' entrance in the synagogue, speak of a man who was there. There were many people there, but they speak of a particular man that was there. And this man's hand was withered. All three speak of the fact, as we've already said, that the Pharisees were there as well. So in that synagogue, that day, amongst others, you have Jesus. There is a man with a deformed and crippled hand, and there are the Pharisees. Luke records, Luke 6, verse 6, that Jesus taught that day in the synagogue. So there's Jesus. He's teaching the people and making up the assembly that he is teaching is this man with a withered hand. There are the Pharisees, and there are others. But see the Pharisees. There they sit in the chief seats in the synagogue. They're wrapped in their religious garb. They have haughty, frowning, self-righteous faces, filled with pride, filled with hypocrisy. In both Mark chapter 3, verse 2 and Luke chapter 6, verse 7, declare that these Pharisees were watching Jesus. They're not intent on listening to what he is teaching, but they're watching to see if he would heal on the Sabbath day, that they could bring accusation against him. So Jesus was there. He's God in a fleshly body, and there sit these Pharisees consumed with one thing: bringing accusation against him. Jesus is teaching. And he's doing so. As he's doing so, the Pharisees are watching him very intently, with scrutiny. They watched him. They watched him. Those words have a sinister tone about them. They watched him. They are hoping that he would, in their sight, break the Sabbath. They want him to heal somebody. They want to accuse him of breaking the Sabbath. They wanted to see him heal. Not so they could believe on him. Not for the benefit of the man with the deformed hand, but that they might bring accusation against him. That's evil. Keep in mind, Pharisaism isn't dead. There are people who come into the Lord's house, and there they sit in their self-righteousness, looking for something that they can find fault in. That's a Pharisee. They're everywhere. So they are in the synagogue with devilish motivation. And there is Jesus, the manifestation of God's grace, God's mercy, God's love, God's goodness. And yet all of this passes by them in their stubborn and obstinate hearts, and they're just hoping that he would heal so that they can indict him for being a Sabbath breaker. There they sit, in their self-righteousness, hypocrisy, pride, judgmental and critical hearts, just looking for fault. Jesus is there in their midst, and they're consumed with bringing accusation against him. Oh, how convoluted their thinking. Luke records, Luke 6, verse 8, he knew their thoughts. He knew their thoughts. That brings us, so that sets the scene. That brings us to the need that was there that day. In each account, following the record of Jesus entering the synagogue, there is the conjunction and. Matthew 12, verses 9 and 10. Mark 3, verse 1. Luke 6, verse 6. Jesus enters the synagogue, and then all three record and. And. So it is Jesus and a particular man. Jesus enters that synagogue, that particular synagogue, on that day with a definite purpose. It was his purpose to go into that particular synagogue on that particular Sabbath to teach. And it was his purpose to enter that particular synagogue on that particular Sabbath to confront the scribes and the Pharisees that he knew would be there. But his main objective, his main aim, his main motivation for going into that particular synagogue on that particular Sabbath was to do a miraculous work upon a particular individual. A man whose hand was withered. Jesus, the one who is God's remedy, God's provision, there He is. And He's able. He's able to mend. He's able to cure. He's able to repair. He's able to fix, to restore, to correct, to deliver and strengthen. And He's there in person. And there's nothing beyond His person and power. Nothing. And Jesus is there for one certain man on that day. A man whose hand was withered. And Jesus has come to that synagogue to minister to this man. A man whose right hand was withered. That is a picture of need. The word withered speaks of that which is shriveled. Something that is deteriorating, shrinking, is a word used to describe dried plants, dry and dead wood, dried fruits. So this man has a hand. Luke tells us it's his right hand that he's unable to use. It's withered. It's withered. There's nothing he can do with it. And we see him there. A man whose hand was withered. Now the hand is used to reach and to grasp. But this man's hand is withered. He could not lay hold of objects. He could not grasp. This hand was a hindrance to him. It brought a great limitation into his life. It became an encumbrance and an inconvenience to him. And there he sits. He's not in the chief seats. He's sitting on the ground. A man whose right hand was withered. But there's something far greater than his hand being withered. Something far more significant than a withered hand. As in all the healing miracles of Christ, there's more to this. There's something much deeper than the particular physical need. And what we have here is a picture of a disabled soul. It is a soul in which, it's the soul through which we have communion with God. It's the soul by which we have a relationship with God and a connection to spiritual matters. But this man's in whose right hand was withered, again, is a picture of a withered soul. A picture of a paralyzed soul. Again, this man's withered hand was most likely very visible that day in the synagogue. I believe that the Pharisees planted him in the synagogue that day, hoping that Jesus would heal him. Put him in plain sight. Perhaps any other day this man would have covered his withered hand in his robe. Not this day. There he sits, hand all withered. They wanted to make sure that Jesus saw this man. But perhaps on every other day, if you looked at this man, he would appear fine because he would conceal his hand in his robe. There's nothing wrong with him. He probably became very good at concealing his hand. And isn't that just like man? Man becomes very good at trying to conceal the real condition of their soul. People come into the house of God all the time. Every time the doors are open. Trying to conceal the real condition of their souls. But whether this man's hand was visible or not that day in the synagogue, I believe it was. But whether it was or not doesn't really matter. Jesus knew. He knew. And even if that man was there with his hand in his robe, Jesus could see. Whatever you try to conceal, He knows. You might be able to fool everyone else, but He knows. But He not only knew of this man's withered hand, He was there for him that day. He was there for him that day. And that brings us to the actual healing. Jesus, before the Pharisees ever spoke a word, Luke says He knew their thoughts. He knew their thoughts. He knew that they were longing for Him to heal so that they could accuse Him of breaking the Sabbath. And there is a man there whose hand was withered, sitting in that synagogue. Jesus looks at him, looks directly at this man. Luke 6, verse 8. He says, "Rise up." Imagine the Pharisees are getting excited. Oh, he's going to do something. He's going to do something. We're going to be able to bring accusation. Rise up. Stand forth. That is, step toward me. Stand forth in the midst. So there is a man going through life with a deformed and crippled hand. He's sitting in his customary manner on the ground. Jesus looks at him and says, "Rise up." And He also tells him, "Stand forth." So what Jesus is telling him is stand up and move toward me. Leave those around you and come toward me. That is always the direction we should be moving, toward Him. And then we read, "And he arose." Why? He had to. There was the effectual power of Christ. And he arose and stood forth. Why? Because he had to. The effectual moving of Christ. At this point, the Pharisees had not said anything. But Jesus knows what they're thinking. He knows that they want Him to heal somebody so they can accuse Him of being a Sabbath breaker and a blasphemer. So there's Jesus. And there's this man, Jesus and this man in the midst. And there are the Pharisees, filled with their self-righteousness and judgmental spirit. And they're watching with devilish intent. All eyes are upon Jesus and this man. It was at this point, and Matthew records, Matthew 12, verse 10, that the Pharisees asked him, saying, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath days?" Matthew records Jesus' response in verses 11 and 12. And he answered them with a thought-provoking question, followed by him asking them, "Wherefore is it lawful to do well on the Sabbath days?" It was at this point that we read Luke 6, verse 10. And looking round about upon them all. So Jesus is looking at all in that synagogue. Mark writes, Mark 3, verse 5, and when he had looked round about on them with anger. He's not angry with the man with the withered hand, but those in the synagogue that day, being grieved for the hardness of their hearts. And oh, what hardness it is. There's Jesus. He's everything. And there they are with devilish intent to bring accusation against him. When he looked round about them with anger, being grieved, the hardness of heart. So we see this man and Jesus standing in the midst. All eyes are upon them. We read in Luke 6, verse 10, that Jesus said to this man, he's already told them two things. Rise up, stand forth. And there he is. And Jesus says to him, stretch forth thy hand. There it is. Stretch forth thy hand. Move your hand away from yourself. That's what he's doing. He's moving his hand away from himself. But more importantly, he's moving his hand toward Christ. And that's what Jesus is telling him. Move your hand away from yourself. Move that deformed and crippled hand away from yourself toward me. Toward me. Matthew tells us, Matthew 12, verse 13, and he stretched it forth. Mark says in Mark 3, verse 5, and he stretched it out. And Luke says in Luke 6, verse 10, and he did so. He had to. He wanted to. He wanted to because of the effectual power of Christ. He had to because of the effectual power of Christ. But this man, without any argument, without any human reasoning, without delay, stretched it forth, believing that Christ was able. He did not say, stretch it forth so that I can heal it. That's not what he said. He just said, stretch it forth. But this man no doubt stretched it forth believing that Christ was able. I believe this man stretching it forth is an act of faith. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all record. And it, the deformed and crippled hand, was restored whole as the other. So his one hand was fine. It was restored whole as the other. Life and energy were imparted to that shriveled and dead hand as he moved it away from himself toward Christ. Blood began to flow. The nerves came to life. And the man felt the stimulation in his hand that had not been there before. Jesus was doing the miraculous. You see, Jesus was doing the miraculous before his hand was restored. He was doing the miraculous simply in this man stretching it forth. It was restored. This man moved his hand away from himself and toward Jesus. And I believe by the time his hand was outstretched, it just opened like a flower, a reviving flower. Just opened. He didn't have to open each finger. Just opened. It was restored whole as the other. Jesus fixed his hand. Revived that hand. It was restored whole. That means entirely, completely. Every part of that hand was restored. This man's life and way of living was changed. If you were to ask this man, you've known the man, you knew his hand was withered, you see him out on the street and perhaps he's hammering a nail with his right hand. You say, hey, wasn't your hand withered? Yeah, it was. And then he would testify. They might ask, did you stretch forth your hand? And he could answer, yes, I did. Did you of your own ability stretch forth your withered hand? And he would say emphatically, no. That was the miraculous work of the Lord. And the saved individual can honestly say, I believed and I came to Christ. You can honestly say that. But you didn't do so of yourself, but by the effectual power of the Lord. So there is Jesus and this man who's been miraculously healed. And I imagine this man, his hand's whole, he's doing this and just, he's enjoying a restored hand. And there they are, in the midst of the synagogue. Notice Luke 6:11. And they were filled with madness, intense anger and rage, and communed one with another. That's what these people do. Pharisees can identify other Pharisees. They have a knack at that. And they commune with one another what they might do to Jesus. Matthew 12 verse 14 records, Then the Pharisees went out and held counsel against him, how they might destroy him. And Mark adds in Mark 3 verse 6, they took counsel with the Herodians. You can always find somebody to agree with you against how they might destroy him. So the marvelous healing miracle only intensified the hatred and the malice of the scribes and Pharisees. And it only escalated their rage toward him. But the man with the deformed and crippled hand went from that meeting with Jesus with his withered hand restored whole. He went home a different man, all because of what Jesus did. Now in closing, let's make some application. The man with the deformed and crippled hand had a hindrance in his life, an inconvenience in his life. In any given assembly, there are many a withered hand. Most are trying to conceal it, but there's many a withered hand. It may be something that you can conceal, but you know, and the Lord knows. And to such we say in Christ's name, whatever's withered in your life, stretch it forth. Stretch it forth. Believe Him. Trust Him. Move that need away from yourself and stretch it forth toward Him. And there are desperate needs and cares and burdens, problems. But hear Jesus say, stretch it forth unto me. There are situations that are overwhelming. There are trials and pressures that are causing great anguish and distress of soul. But hear Jesus say, stretch it, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Stretch it forth unto me. Realize there's a problem. Move it from yourself to Him. There are those who are at their wits' end. And there are those who are in great depths. And Jesus says, stretch it. Doesn't matter what it is. Stretch it forth unto me. There are disappointments. There are temptations. There are anxieties. Hear Jesus say, stretch it forth unto me. There are insurmountable obstacles. Stretch it forth unto me. When Jesus said to this man with the crippled hand, stretch forth thy hand. Stretch forth thy hand. That hand that is withered. That hand that is deformed. That hand that limits you. Stretch it forth unto me. And I believe He says the same to us. I believe He says the same to us in every church service. And every day. Stretch it. Stretch it, whatever it is, unto me. Take inventory of your life. Whatever is withered, and there isn't anybody here that doesn't have that which is withered in their life. That which should be good and yet it's withered. Stretch it forth unto him. When Jesus said, stretch forth thy hand, he was inviting that man into glorious possibilities. Stretch forth thine hand. Here's what we would do. Well, Lord, why? Why? Why do you want me to stretch it forth? You're going to have to explain every step of the way here because I want to know. Just stretch it forth. Just stretch it forth. Well, Lord, what are you going to do? Stretch it forth and see. That's what we need to do. Just stretch it forth and see. And he's saying the same to us. Stretch into the possibilities and depend upon him to do the miraculous. You stretch it forth. He does the miraculous. So whatever it is that is a hindrance or in the way, stretch it forth unto Christ. Don't just learn to live with that hindrance. Don't just learn to live with that limitation. Stretch it forth unto him and experience the miraculous power of Christ. Jesus restored this man's withered hand. More importantly, Jesus is the restorer of withered lives. He is the restorer of withered lives. Stretch it forth unto him. Brother Ben, if you'd come and lead us